Welcome to another edition of Anglican Unscripted. This is episode 909. I'm Kevin Kallsen.
I'm George Conger. Today is April 1st, 2025.
All right, welcome to another episode of Anglican Unscripted. I can't believe you'd join us for April 1st, April Fool's Day. What do you want to watch on April Fool's Day? Let's do some unscripted, George. Oh, boy. So this is where George and I hang out a couple times a week, looking through the news, talking about our favorite stories, and this is our happy place. And we want to thank you for joining us for this time. Before we get too far into the show, please like this episode on YouTube or Facebook. It tells those companies that we're good to watch and they should promote us. Go to the comments section every week. The comment section is alive with all of your comments. Comment on what we say, but also commenting on what other commenters talk about. So we appreciate that. Please share this episode with your friends and family if you've not done so. And if you're not a subscriber, what an opportunity to finally take that bold step and click that red rectangle, and then the bell pops up, and you are instantly subscribed to Anglican Unscripted forever until you unsubscribe. George, how are you doing this week?
Just wonderful. Exhausted, but happy with the work I'm doing.
That's great, yeah. It's springtime. Summer has not arrived quite yet. It's a little cool here in Maryland. I'm assuming it's 72 in Florida again, with no humidity.
Yes, beautiful weather.
Yeah.
And just we getting ready for Easter coming up. And I did since our last show, I did a Deanery Daughters of the King meeting, and they had me speak on exorcism for an hour and a half. So I had lots of feedback on that, but it's exciting, the work we're doing.
Yeah. We didn't record last week because our schedules didn't line up on Tuesday, and then on Friday was what we call Peak Day. And Peak Day is a Washington, D.C. term, and it refers to peak bloom. And the cherry blossoms were abloom on Friday, so Jill and I drove the hour and a half into downtown D.C., got a parking spot, and walked to the title area and saw the cherry blossoms, walked to the mall and walked to the Smithsonian. And I think when we're all done, it was like 7 or 8 miles of walking, which is fine when you're 30, but had a great day. So you're watching video right now of some of that fun walk, but it was a beautiful sunny day. And George, you may not know this, but there's not cherry blossoms in Washington, D.C. because George Washington cut down a cherry tree. Apparently, the Japanese donated these back in the 1885, and they gave us about 4,000 trees. We don't have very many of the originals, but we got them all over D.C. now. It's crazy. And that's what I did. George, let's move on to the news here. Pulling up the news stories very much to the top. Justin Welby, even though he's retired and has stepped down as the Archbishop of Canterbury, and I think I suggested this when it happened, that every once in a while he's going to show up in the news, just because they're going to want the voice of a pro-gay Archbishop of Canterbury. They're going to want to get him on camera again and say, what do you think about what's going on, Justin? But he talked about much more in this interview than I suspected he would, because he wanted to talk about why he doesn't have a job anymore. So let's talk about why he doesn't have a job anymore and find out if he understands why he doesn't have a job anymore. Let's talk, George.
Well, this appeared on BBC Two on one of their Sunday morning programs, and it appeared on a news program rather than a magazine program, meaning this was an interesting choice to devote to the news coverage section. It was a longish 40-odd minute interview. Justin Welby was not wearing he had an open neck shirt and a blazer. He was not dressed as a priest or a minister or a bishop. And he was interviewed by one of their news people. And the interviewer, Laura Kessenberg, she really wasn't that good, and that she really had no knowledge and didn't know what to ask him, and basically came at him from a political point of view of why isn't if it's the Church of England, why doesn't it reflect the beliefs of the culture of England? Because that's not how churches operate. But Justin Welby used that to say, well, I'm in favor of gay blessings. It's just this damn General Synod who can't get their act together and do what I wanted. It was a train wreck. I'll call it a train wreck. Mm-hmm. We learned nothing new, in the sense there were no new facts, no things that were hidden came to light. What we did see was that Justin Welby still does not understand what happened. He said that when he came into office, he said he was in office for 11 weeks, and that's when and then he was hit with all the safeguarding problems, and he was totally unprepared for it. And he had no staff to deal with it. And he was proud to say that when he resigned, there were 66 people working on safeguarding.
Not people, bureaucrats. Let's call, yes.
So what Justin Welby basically was saying is that I inherited a administrative and political problem. The political problem was that I have always wanted to make safeguarding independent of the church, but I couldn't get it through General Synod. And I didn't have the bureaucratic staff to handle this until the very end. So at the beginning, I was overwhelmed. And yes, I wasn't up to the job. I wasn't up to the job that was facing me, but he asked us to take pity on it. Mm-hmm. It reminded me of Jimmy Carter, who towards the end of his presidency said, this job is bigger than any one man can handle. Then Ronald Reagan seemed to be sleeping 20 hours a day, yet did a great job.
Yeah, but a lot happened to Jimmy Carter in those short years. He had Russia invade Afghanistan. He had Iran take a couple hundred hostages. He had the oil crisis. I mean, yes, I'm sure Jimmy Carter thought all is going wrong. I can't do anything right. And now I see that also in Justin Welby, where things were happening, but every response he had was an incorrect response.
Welby said that he backed gay blessings, and he felt that that was one of his things that he could have done more to try to get it through Synod, mm-hmm. but you needed a supermajority to do that, and he couldn't achieve that politically. And this was very disconcerting because there was no spiritual sense whatsoever about Justin Welby. There was no moral center there. This just was, I hate to say this because it's unkind, he was an empty suit with no understanding of what the call to episcopacy was and the call to serve the Lord was. Rather, he was just an official, a high-ranking official in Christianity Limited, the limited liability LLC, yep. PLC. Yes, being an Archbishop of Canterbury has all the trappings of state and this and that, but still you would expect some sort of sense of evangelism, of what the church needs to do to turn around the moral character of society. And yet Justin didn't seem to be cognizant that was his job.
Yeah, I think we saw that early on, though, that he didn't really understand how to identify where society was going wrong and where the church could help fix it. And equally, he could not understand where the church was going wrong and how to fix that. And, it's a dual problem when your church is trying to duplicate society and not change it. Mm-hmm. And that's where he fell into.
And, George and Kevin, you may say, oh, well, you guys have it out for it. You're negatively disposed to him anyway. We're not the only one. I'm not the only one with a negative viewpoint of this interview. Helen Ann Hartley, the Bishop of Newcastle, said this was totally unnecessary, this interview. And all it did was serve to reharm once again the survivors of abuse and let them know that the church still didn't take this seriously or understand what was going on. Some of the abuse activists have been on X and basically repeating the arguments that Helen and Hartley made, that they just don't get it, do they? They don't understand the harm that was done and think that if we only had a few more bureaucrats who could fill out the right forms, then it all would be well. When the reality is you needed a change of heart so that a church, so that first off, people don't offend, and that you attract the right people into ministry. Yeah. And second, that you have leaders who can act decisively and with a God-centered view of what needs to be done when people are harmed by officers or leaders of the Christian church. Yeah. And Justice Welby showed that he did understand that.
No, because now you have 66 paper pushers, pencil pushers, fulfilling the role that they will not be able to fulfill because you still don't understand the problem. And if you can't identify the problem, you're going to just make it worse.
Well, there was a little op-ed piece in I think it was the Telegraph, where somebody basically said flower ministries are disappearing in the Church of England because the little old ladies who arrange flowers now have to go through safeguarding training and have to go through all these hoops, and that each parish has to have a safeguarding officer. So we've gone from totally ignoring it to totally overkill, so that a parish that has a difficult time attracting volunteers, attracting officers to be wardens, is now burdened with an additional unnecessary and plain foolish administrative hurdles. So that, are you seriously going to make the 80-year-old who comes over on Saturday morning to arrange the flowers for Sunday sit through 8 hours of training over these weekends? It's foolishness. They just don't get it.
No. All right. We talked a lot in the last years of Anglican Unscripted about how the Obama administration would try to use American money to influence politics in Africa, Asia, Europe, by saying that we're going to give you this $3 million grant or loan or whatever, but you can only get this money if you adhere to these principles: LGBTQ, queer affirmative, or environmental affirmative, whatever, climate change. If you agree with these principles, you can have this money, and we may not even ask for it back. It's just a grant. Oops, we'll lose it in the system. Boy, did they lose it in the system. And I'm like, that's just bad. That's not how we affect change. You can't put strings on money. But now Trump's in charge, and I guess he's putting strings on in a bias that I like, and hopefully it will help people. His bias is Europe, especially England. You can't have our money or our agreements or negotiate on tariffs if you ain't got no free speech.
No free trade if there's no free speech. Mm-hmm. So first off, from a big picture perspective, this is a new world order.
Yes, it is.
The old way of doing things is done and gone, and I don't think it'll ever come back. And all of a sudden, the UK is understanding what it feels like to be Burundi or Uganda,
Congo, Rwanda. Yeah,
you got to do this if you want something. Mm-hmm. I think it's on the front page of the Telegraph this morning. But Donald Trump is basically, I think 25% tariffs on automobiles, for instance, are beginning tomorrow, April 2nd.
The 2nd, yeah.
And that is going to automobiles. I think Mini Coopers and
Jaguar, Land Rover.
Well, whatever those manufactured cars that are shipped from the UK to the US will have an additional 25% tariff. Because there are tariffs from the EU and the UK on automobiles made in the United States and shipped to Britain. Yes, you can buy a Ford in England, but that Ford is an English Ford made in England. You're not going to be able to buy American cars if you so desired. Well, Trump, the Starmer administration has wanted to get out of these things and is basically saying to Donald Trump, look, we're special. We're the English. You have a special relationship going back to the First World War and all this and that. And Donald Trump is saying, hey, when you throw Isabel von Spruce and Adam Smith Connor into prison, we're going to treat you like we treated the apartheid regime in South Africa in the 70s as a pariah state, that we're not going to give, or Rhodesia under Ian Smith. You're doing things that is morally wrong, and we're going to use our money to affect the change.
But we're Britain.
And what you're doing...
We're Britain. We have the Aston Martin. Don't you want an Aston Martin? Come on.
Well, maybe the people who can afford Aston Martins can afford another 25% tariff.
Okay, agreed.
Because I don't think money... Transportation is not why you buy an Aston Martin. Let's put it that way. But what Trump is basically saying is that Britain has become... He's not attacking the English people or the English or the... He's attacking a government and an elite that is essentially shutting down free speech. Mm-hmm. Kevin, you shared something with me about a toddler that I just...
Well, I mean, we can go through the list. You provided a healthy list here, but in the last year in the school year 2022 till now, 2 toddlers have been sent home for misgendering another toddler or misgendering a teacher. We're talking children from the age of 2 to 5 are being sent home from preschool. They have preschool there as well because they're misgendering. I mean, every week we get more and more stories out of England and Britain, and the government is never there to combat the story and say, oh, no, that didn't happen. Of course, when they do say it didn't happen, they're lying.
It's been a bad week for England. We had the Sentencing Commission, which is a rather nebulous group that doesn't seem to be responsive to anybody, rejecting calls to have equal treatment to people based on race, color, sex, gender, all this stuff. Instead, they've agreed. They wanted to put in that non-whites would receive lesser sentences for crimes than if they had been white and had committed that crime. Now, there was a political uproar, and I think they've suspended that ruling. But
they did not implement it on paper, but it still exists. It's still happening regardless of being on paper.
And another case, there were 2 parents who, on a private WhatsApp chat group, complained about the administrators of their local school, and they had 6 policemen show up at their house, basically tell them to watch it because they could get in trouble for these criticisms. Hmm. I mean, listen, crime and low-level crime in Britain is pretty bad right now. Street crime, burglaries, muggings, purse snatching,
stabbings. Yeah.
And you're not going to get 6 policemen to respond to your home if you've been burglarized. But you will get 6 policemen to come to your home if you call out the local government's failure in education. And then we have the abortion prayer and protest people being jailed or arrested or charged with fault crimes. This is the thing that J.D. Vance brought up in his Munich security conference speech. And Donald Trump is, I don't want to say weaponizing this, but what he is doing is basically saying, look, if you want to sell your stuff to us, you have to have an equal tariff playing field. In other words, you can't put a tariff on our manufactured automobiles and let yours come in for no tariff. We have to have equal tariffs. And second, while we're at it, we want you people to behave like decent human beings and not like autocratic monsters.
Well, we want, you said your people, he's not concerned about the citizens. We want the policymakers in England to start treating citizens like they're actual citizens, like they have value. And that's the strange reality is To move to a tariff-based system for free trade is very difficult. This next 6 months in a year, your 401ks and pension plans are going to take a hit. I know, mine is. Okay, I'm not retiring early. But the problem is it's just so broken. If I want to sell milk, if I owned a dairy and wanted to sell milk in Canada, I would have to pay a 225% tariff on a gallon of milk to sell it there. Okay, if they want to sell milk here, there's no tariff. Well, there's now. Okay, and it's so unbalanced. Now it's not unbalanced evenly. It's not every industry, but it's enough that you need to put a monkey wrench in this to fix fair trade, because there is no fair trade.
If you're a South Carolina or Louisiana rice farmer, Japan puts a 700% tariff on rice production. Mm-hmm. Whereas we can buy, if we want to go to the grocery store, buy imported Japanese rice to our heart's content with no tariffs. Mm-hmm. Now, each of these little things is developed over time, from Canadian lumber to Japanese rice to British automobiles. But Donald Trump is basically saying, look, the American consumer is subsidizing the bad behavior of the international elites, the leaders of Britain and Japan and Canada and the EU, through these uneven economic policies, and most especially places like China in particular.
Yes. Now, my question would be, is he going to apply the same freedom of speech, freedom of religion to China as he does to England?
Don't know, but yeah. I would say probably not, because China is a lost cause. England can pull itself out of its nosedive. Mm-hmm. England does have a 1,000+ year tradition of parliamentary democracy and free expression of speech.
Yeah. So
Nigel Farage spoke at a political conference last month in Washington, CPAC it was called.
Yeah.
Conservative Political Action Committee or Conference. And he said that in my country, where you can't say anything, you might be put in prison. And then he concluded, we should be allowed to say whatever the hell we want. Now, there's the conservatives in England, reform is going through a civil war, which is of no benefit to anybody. But Farage's point is one that he has Donald Trump's ear. And if he's saying this at CPAC, he's saying this, and you can pretty well be sure that this is influencing Donald Trump's worldview about what's happening in Britain. Yeah. But there's no Chinese Nigel Farage. If there is, he's in a labor camp, or he's 6 feet under.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting to watch Donald Trump have to deal with now Putin. You know, Putin is not the pushover that Trump thought he would be, and he's having a little difficulty getting him to the table to negotiate something. And these things take a while to work out. They were so used to the previous administration. Biden's on the phone. He can wait. Trump's on the phone. He can wait. It doesn't work that way, but we shall see. Fun to watch. This is what we journalists like to do, sit down and watch the news. And let's watch story number 3. Believe it or not, even though Archbishop Justin Welby stepped down, the LLF, Living, Love, and Faith process is still trying to work its way through the Synod of the Church of England. And we have more news this week. The head of the LLF process, Bishop Martin Snow, is still flogging prayers of
he's
love.
Trying to sell.
Okay. Yeah. Flagellating. Okay. Still flagellating.
No, not flagellating, but he's flogging. He's trying to sell prayers of love and faith.
I got it. You sometimes sentences you write don't they're too intellectual for me. Okay. Flogging prayers of loving, living faith, George.
Martin Snow responded to an editorial in the Anglican Futures webpage, a very good site, which I encourage you to visit for news about the Church of England. And to summarize what Snow said is that in England, we need to be able to live with dual integrities. We need to be able to have one group who thinks that homosexual actions are sinful, and we need to have a second group who believes that they can be blessed or are a blessing or a gift from God. Mm-hmm. And we need to have these two things exist under a single church. Well, the problem with that is that conservatives do not believe this is a second order issue, meaning a adiaphora, a thing of less importance. In other words, where do we put the candles on the altar? On the altar or on the side? Do we have candles and all that? They see this as a salvation issue because it is something that, Paul says, if you engage in the behavior that the Church of England wants to have services to bless, you will not enter the kingdom of God. So this is something that is contrary to the clear, unambiguous teaching of Scripture in the minds of conservatives. Now, liberals may argue against this, but their arguments have not persuaded the people who see this as sinful behavior. Nor have the conservatives' arguments persuaded those who see this can be a blessing. The problem is that Martin Snow is saying to conservatives who are in the minority in the House of Bishops, for instance, to trust us. Just like you trusted us over women, clergy, and bishops. To which conservatives throw up their hands and say, oh, that was a dumb move.
Fool us once, fool us twice. Now, when testing things, I do this as a business owner, I always have a litmus test. If I'm going to introduce something new to my company, can I go a month, 2 months, 6 months, and look and see if that change was a benefit to my company? A litmus test. What do I need to see here to make sure that change did something good? And if it didn't do something good, do I have the mechanism to take that change out? What the church here has done with certainly female clergy, and now with this future dual integrities over same-sex blessings, do they have the ability to step back if it's not working? No.
In fact, this past weekend, Watch, which is the women's lobbying group, the radical lobbying group, is calling for the Church of England to dump its 5 guiding principles that allow there to be 2 integrities on the ordination of women. Whether those who oppose it are welcome, those who are for it are welcome as well. They want it to be an all or nothing. You either support women clergy or you get out. So that conservatives say, if it's something like the women's issue, we can't, and we've spent 30, 20 plus years fighting over this with promises. If those promises are not honored, and we look at the activists on the gay side, who basically call us evil and despicable because we do not celebrate what they believe, we're fools if we give an inch. We've been fooled before. We're not going to be fooled again. Now, it doesn't mean that those who are in favor, who are opposed to women's orders, are also opposed to gay blessings. That's not a one-to-one group. But they just see how a similar issue was treated and find that the trust cannot be given to the bishops of the Church of England or to the administrative machinery.
The episcopacy of the Church of England has not earned trust. And that's something you earn. And hopefully we can look back at history and say, ooh, we don't want to repeat that again. No way. However, the Church of England is not the only church trying to put something new in place. The Church of Sweden also wants to codify that if you do not completely support same-sex marriage within the church, you cannot be ordained.
Or work. Or even work in the church. Yeah. Right now, you will not be ordained in the Church of Sweden if you oppose same-sex blessings. But if you're already out there and you have a job, you're not going to be, only 1.5% of church marriages are same-sex marriages in Sweden. Mm-hmm. And if you are in the Swedish equivalent of my little town in the middle of nowhere, it's not an issue. You can be against it and all this and that. But now there's a move in the Swedish equivalent of their General Synod to say everybody must affirm this. And if you do not affirm this, you will not be allowed to be a minister in the Church of Sweden. So you will lose your job. Right now, you can't be ordained and you're not likely to get a new job. But This is now, we've reached the stage of the purge is about to take place, that those who are against traditionalists in the Church of Sweden will have to leave if they do not sign documents affirming their belief in the morality of this action. This is a proposal. It's not happened yet. But, the people, the conservatives in the Church of England look at the Church of Sweden as a model of what might it be in 10, 15 years.
Yeah. Well, some look at it and say, "Ooh, that's a perfect model." They slowly weed out the undesirables, and they can put a rule in that no more undesirables need apply. So the liberals in the Church of England say, look at the Church of Sweden. We could be that good and holy one day. All right. Let's move on to our next story. We're going to go local here. Diocese of Florida to hold its third bishop election in the summer of 2026. They just can't get good bishops down there. They just get boom, 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 boom. That Charlie Holt guy, Charlie Holt guy, Charlie Holt guy. So let's talk about this in the big context of there's a new leadership in the presiding bishop's office who may be able to affect this or not. But the Diocese of Florida, even though they've had two successful elections for a bishop, Bishop-elect Holt, he was never consecrated and always ended up being taken out by complainers.
Yeah, it's the church equivalent of what we call lawfare now in the United States.
Sure.
Charlie Holt was validly elected twice. But then the liberal bloc complained each time and cited perceived irregularities. And the first time they redid it. And then the second time he did it just fine. But then the complainers went to the national church diocese, and Charlie Holt didn't get the necessary consents to be bishop because of fears that he would not be pro-gay. So there's been a listening process for the past 2 years in the Diocese of Florida. And what's happening is what happened in Albany. Albany went through a listening process, and they brought in a liberal and a conservative bishop. And the problem was the conservative bishop was a bit of an idiot. And
allegedly.
Allegedly. I have no personal feelings about the man, but he's not the person if you would want to preserve and protect the faith received by the saints. And he needed the job. So what happened to Albany is that as soon as they had 50% plus one, the liberals won. And the new bishop now is fully paid up member of the gay agenda. And Albany is not the diocese it once was and never will be again.
No.
Because it's conservatives are, they're retiring and, basically, I'm too old to start over again. I, need 3 or 4 more years to max out my pension. I'm just going to hold my breath and wait it out. And the new people coming in will not be like the old people. It was the laity in Albany that basically let down the side in pushing this fella. Well, that's probably what's going to happen in Florida. Basically going to have a listening process to wear out the opponents of same-sex marriage. To finally, people throw up their hands and say, the hell with it. I'm not going to go to any more diocesan meetings. I'm just going to spend my time in my parish and just,
keep my head down
into my shell.
Yeah.
So I'm not optimistic about what's going to happen in the Diocese of Florida. Now, God has a strange way of proving me wrong time and time again. So good things may happen.
Well,
but I don't know.
But now look at a different context. We have Presiding Bishop Sean Rose in charge now. He has indicated that he does not see a strong future with the liberal wing of the church.
Right.
Okay.
He was interviewed by Matthew Ulver, of the editor of the Living Church, and he basically said he wants the Episcopal Church to work with the ACNA. He was very positive and sweet and loving, and basically had the most positive statement ever made by an Episcopal presiding bishop about the ACNA. But the proof is in the pudding, is in the eating of the pudding. In other words, Michael Curry made affirming noises.
He did, loved it.
The reality was that the lawyers ran the show for Michael Curry, as they did for Catherine Jefferts Schori, and made life miserable. There's a little item in the local news in South Carolina that the Holy Trinity Windermere, which was one of the parishes that at 2020 lost their buildings to the Episcopal Diocese of South Carolina, and they turned it over, and there was no remnant congregation. And so the church property was put on the market 2 years ago for $6.9 million. And it was just sold to a developer last month, for $2.9 million. So basically knock down fire sale price. Now, it doesn't really bother the Episcopal Diocese because they got $3 million cash. But Holy Trinity Windermere is still meeting in rented facilities because they haven't been able to replace the building they lost. This is happening right now, yet there's noises of sweetness and light coming out of New York. Can this make any difference?
Well, you mentioned Michael Curry. I was at the Primates gathering in London years ago when there was too much confliction to have a Primates meeting. They would have a gathering, and Justin Welby called everybody in. He had Archbishop Foley there, and at the table was Foley and Michael Curry, and Michael Curry was saying, "Hey, we can get along here." And Archbishop Foley Beaches listed 3 churches you're suing right now. Can you stop your litigation? Well, that never happened. And there's a lot of always talk that, yes, of course, we can be ecumenical with the ACNA, but I don't know yet. I want to see it before I believe it. It's like trusting a bishop in the Church of England, George.
Well, on one level, we do have traffic. In my diocese, I think there are 3 or 4 at least that I can think of ACNA clergy who basically came into the diocese as if they were like coming from the Anglican Church of Canada. Ellis Bruss and Cynthia Bruss, one is rector of a church in Fort Pierce, the other in Melbourne. And they, Ellis led the vestry retreat for new vestry members conference last week. I mean, they're fully fledged active members of the Episcopal Diocese of Central Florida when they were leaders of the Anglican Church of North America, and before that, the AMIA. Mm-hmm. So, at least in my area, there's traffic.
Cross-pollination.
Now, is that going to happen in Albany? I don't think so.
Los Angeles?
No. I didn't see anybody from the Anglican Diocese up there going into the Diocese of Albany. I see people leaving Albany to go to the Anglican Diocese, but not the other way around.
Yeah.
So is this an anomaly here in Central Florida? I don't know.
It could be.
Is that the future? I don't know.
Well, but here's the question. Is the Diocese of Florida the future, which is either going to go the way of Albany or maybe retain some rights and be the next Central Florida? Which is the future? Is Central Florida the future of the Diocese of Florida, or is Albany the future of the Diocese of Florida? That's kind of the question, because the Diocese of Florida right now has a new bishop, and the bishop is discovering that some things.
Central Florida has a new bishop.
Florida, Central. Yeah. At my age, this is just too much information. The Diocese of Central Florida has a new bishop, and he's going through some of the budgetary items and going, this doesn't make sense, this doesn't make sense, this doesn't make sense. Does some investigation and finds out, oh my gosh, we're spending money we don't have on things we don't use. And I saw in the news that you have sold the Canterbury Retreat Center.
Yeah, we had a conference center in Oviedo, Florida, which is a suburb of Orlando. Mm-hmm. And when it was built, it was out in the woods. Orlando has expanded outward with growth. And meanwhile, the conference has been losing hundreds of thousands of dollars a year paid for out of the diocese funds. And when the new bishop came in, he looked at this and said, hey, wait a second, this is eating up a huge amount. It doesn't affect our budget, but it is just destroying our cash reserves. So he said, well, let's sell the place because we can always rent the Catholic spot. It's not like there's not a lot of hotel and conference centers in Florida. It's not like we don't need to worry about that. So he just sold it for several millions of dollars, and his aim is to cut the diocesan assessment from 11% down to something much lower to allow parishes to keep their money to enable them to grow. The new bishop has a policy of not funding failure, but investing in growth and things that are successful. The old way was we have a conference center and we're going to keep this conference center to show the world we have a conference center.
Yeah.
Do we need one? No,
not anymore. I mean, it's hard now for dioceses to justify having camps and to have conference centers. It's a difficult thing to justify in this day and age of real estate pricing. Let's go to our next story. You titled it Trouble in Canterbury, Montreal, and Melbourne Elections. This is a multi-headed piece here, but we're going to talk about some articles we read and some stuff by Andrew Goddard that talks about, hey, there's trouble in elections, and we've got some important elections coming up, like Canterbury, who's going to be the new archbishop. So let's head into that.
Andrew Goddard, British priest, theologian, we published his stuff on Anglican Inc., has written a number of stories about the opaque process to elect the committee to elect a new Archbishop of Canterbury. And that evidently it's very unclear as to what's actually happening. One of the little things is that the last General Synod put in these reserved spaces for have to be so many women clergy and have to be so many lay representatives and this and that and the other, so that with all the ex officio members of the commissions, like the dean and whatnot, and the bishop of this and the bishop of that, there's not space for a male rector in the Diocese of Canterbury to be elected to this commission because there's no spots left for him. So what does this mean? Basically, Goddard's point is that this is a bureaucratic mess, and it's unclear what's going to come out of this. Mm-hmm. And in Montreal, they had a search committee and came up with some candidates, but then the search committee, half of them resigned after the list was put out, saying that one of these people has safeguarding concerns, but we're not allowed to say who it was, and we're quitting because we just don't like this whole thing. And so the diocese now has a list of candidates, one of whom is a joker, but the bishop is saying, oh, well, none of them are immediate threats or this or that or the other. So what does this mean for the process in Montreal? And in Melbourne, we've had about maybe a quarter of the members of their search committee pull out for unstated reasons. So in a time when transparency is the call everybody is making in all walks of life, major episcopal elections are getting more opaque and more opaque and more opaque, with facts withheld, committees stacked. It's not a good sign for the health of the church.
I mean, and it's happening not just in the church. I remember 3 or 4 years ago, the Oscar nomination committee said that if your movie wants to win an Oscar, you have to have so many transgendered people on the production, so many queer people on the production, so many women on the production, so many black. I mean, the complete you have to DEI your movie to death in order to be considered for an Oscar nomination. Mm-hmm. This is kind of the same type of bureaucracy. We're going to throw all these requirements in for the people who are going to be the future people who are going to elect the future leader. So, does not work. In my experience, that does not work very well. Forward in Faith UK, I didn't know they're still around. I've not heard from them in a while, are worried that they just discovered they have one less flying bishop. Before we get too far into the program, George, we are too far into the program. There's people who do not know what a flying bishop is. What's a flying bishop?
A flying bishop provides alternative episcopal oversight in the Church of England for those who are unable to accept the ministrations of bishops who support or affirm the ordination of women. And the society is a group of bishops who provide this oversight. And one of their past members, in fact, the president was Tony Robbins. Robbins, I think. Not the guy with the videos on public television, but he was Bishop of Wakefield.
Yes,
he was a flying bishop in the Northern Province as a suffragan. His successor is not society bishop. And so Forward in Faith is saying, oh, wait a second, we've got one less guy to do what we need done in the Northern Province. And we're not too keen about this. So they're saying we need another flying bishop. Will they get it? I doubt it. I very much doubt it, because there's not the money for another flying bishop. And suffragans are basically chosen by the diocesan. And if the diocesan says, okay, I want to have a woman bishop, or I want to have a transgendered dwarf bishop,
a hobbit,
there's not much the society can do about it. So they basically have been caught out of not having prepared the ground for the replacement of the Bishop of Wakefield.
I'm looking here at story number 9. We kind of covered that. Okay. Some news items that popped up this week. Phil Ashey has been elected the Bishop of Western Anglicans. He served with the AAC. In fact, did he not serve with Ellis Brust, who we mentioned previously in the program? Because I
don't know, but I know.
Just memory serves. Who knows? And also, Drexel Gomez's family is seeking some medical help for Drexel, because he's had surgeries, but this type of surgery requires a lot of blood, apparently.
Yeah, Phil Ashey was consecrated on Saturday, Bishop of Western Anglicans. So just sort of in-house personal stuff. Congratulations, Phil. Great
absolutely.
job, and I wish you joy in your episcopacy.
He's been on the show like 4 or 5 times. He's great benefit in his knowledge of making legalese lay understandable. So, yeah.
The only problem is he's moved from St. Simon's Island, Georgia, to Southern California, and all of a sudden he's going to discover that the taxes and housing and cost of living are not the same as a coastal island off Georgia.
That's true.
And Drexel Gomez's family has been on Facebook, and there's now a blood drive. He has had surgeries for stomach cancer, and it's not going well, and he's lost a lot of blood. And there's been an appeal for people to come donate at the hospital in Nassau to help Drexel, because things are not looking as good as they could. So keep the Gomez family and Archbishop Drexel Gomez in your prayers. Indeed.
All right, that covers today's program. Just some technical news here.
We do have that Indian corruption story.
No, forget it. No more for April, even though it's the 1st. When you live full-time in your RV at a campground for more than 3 months, they make you move. Today's moving day, April 1st, they're making me move 3 sites over. Why? I don't know. I guess they want to be sure that my RV still runs. It must be a policy down here in Maryland. I'm Kevin Kallsen.
And I'm George Conger. And you've been watching episode 909 of Anglican Unscripted.